You are listening to episode 38 of the EU Startups podcast. Today's guest is Seedstars CEO Alisée de Tonnac, who set out to impact people's lives in emerging markets through tech and entrepreneurship. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the EU Startups podcast. And before we jump into the interview with today's guest, I'm excited to introduce our podcast sponsor. This episode of the EU Startups podcast is brought to you by Vanta, helping you scale security practices and automate compliance for the industry's most sought-after standards. To close and grow major customers, you have to demonstrate trust. But providing your security and compliance can be time-consuming, tedious and expensive, especially for startups, unless you use Vanta. Vanta automates up to 90% of the work for the most sought-after compliance standards like SOC 2 and ISO 27001 and gets you audit-ready in weeks instead of months. With Vanta, you get up to 400 hours of your time back and reach up to 85% in cost savings. And for a limited time, EU Startups listeners get $1,000 off Vanta. Just go to vanta.com/EU Startups without a dash to get started. Today I'm excited to interview Alisée de Tonnac, the CEO of Seedstars. According to our annual ranking, Alisée is one of Europe's most influential women in the startup and venture capital space. During her 10 years at Seedstars, Alisée has catalyzed over $100 million into impact-driven investments. Over the years, Seedstars has run countless of entrepreneurial programs, invested in many startups, launched a coding academy, and built an investment platform to support emerging fund managers from across the globe. Alisée, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to the EU Startups podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So let's start at the very beginning, Alisée. What inspired you to start Seedstars and how did it all begin?
How did it all begin? I think it starts before Seedstars, where I was working in a luxury cosmetic global group. And as much as I learned a lot, I also learned, more importantly, what I didn't want to do. And I felt like my impact or the purpose I was trying to pursue was not aligned with who I wanted to become so quickly. I was very fortunate to meet with my co-founders. And they were already, so at that time, Pierre and Michael had already launched Seedstars, the idea of incubating entrepreneurs and businesses. But quickly, we kind of pivoted and focused on emerging markets because in 2013, we had done our first world tour. And it was obvious that there were so many gaps to fill. It was extremely fulfilling to support on the ground and mentor the different entrepreneurs and learn from their perspective and the needs that were evolving in these regions. So it became obvious for us that Seedstars had to be fully focused to the emerging frontier startup ecosystems and figure out the best way to support these entrepreneurs to scale their businesses, their impact-driven businesses.
Exciting. And how did those startups in emerging markets differ from those in more developed markets? Were there some common differentiators that you spotted?
So I guess, how can I say this? So every year until pandemic, we were organizing the Seedstars World Competition. We were in over 100 countries where physically we would go to every country and operate pitching events and bring the best to Switzerland for our annual summit. So you have to imagine over 100 cultures, nationalities coming under one roof. And there were so many things that separated us from our cultural, religious, economic, social background. But when it came to why we were entrepreneurs, why we were building the businesses that we were on the ground in our respective communities, it's very difficult to explain in words, but it was like instant magic where everyone spoke the same language. Everyone had the same hardships and highs and lows that we could relate to one another. So strangely enough, I think entrepreneurs have quite a universal language, but
Hmm.
then of course launching and scaling a business in frontier markets is very different to Europe. For example, what we're seeing already 10 years ago at that time, if you wanted to launch an e-commerce business in Europe, like you had already the whole infrastructure that played out to your advantage. So you could go on Shopify, build your list. You could use the postal service or DHL. You could have all the payment solutions so that your customers could pay. And it's quite a fluid process. Whereas
Hmm.
in these markets, it's really different. It feels like because the infrastructure is lacking and there's still so much education to be done for consumers to buy online, to feel like it's safe to buy online, the approach is much more complex and different. And so as you scale, in many ways, you have to integrate the whole value chain so that you can successfully grow as a business in one country and then across a region.
Hmm.
So that's kind of a harder element to launching a business in these markets. But on the other side, there's so many advantages because you can leapfrog technology. So you can go directly to a next generation technology, which was much more resilient, cost effective, and usually more sustainable to access consumers. You can avoid legacies of big lobbying or industries that have had heavy investments in infrastructure so that are not willing to pivot as quickly, whereas in these markets you can do it much faster. So these would be some of the advantages also of launching in these markets. So there are
Hmm.
many things, and of course cultural context and it's more specific context across the different regions, but if I can highlight just one or two, these would be the one.
Hmm. Awesome. And you had quite an interesting journey as the CEO of Seedstars so far, and I assume you had many different aspects of impact, both into entrepreneurs themselves and then through the markets those entrepreneurs and their companies are serving. What kind of impact that you or Seedstars have created over the year are you most proud of?
So personally, as one of the founders of Seedstars, I think the most direct impact is already seeing the team that we have scaled, the people that have worked for us and that have continued their adventures in very similar contexts as entrepreneurs or joining other organizations like Seedstars, public or private ones. So that maybe is the immediate impact that is the most fulfilling, is seeing that from our idea, we've built a community, we've built career paths, we've supported the journeys of many people that have allowed Seedstars to be this successful.
Hmm.
And this also encompasses the larger community of our Seedstars mentors, ambassadors, portfolio companies. And then what we try to aim as targets is we've built our theory of change, which is an impact framework that allows you to kind of measure the indicators that you believe are going to give justice to the potential intended impact that you want along the line. And here it's looking at the job creation, looking at the growth of the businesses, maybe not only in terms of revenues and follow-on funding, but also in terms of the maturity of their products and services that really solve a critical pain in their local communities. And
Hmm.
so there's so many numbers to share, and across project, industry, thematic, geography, that keeps us up all night.
Hmm. Okay, exciting. And so you also invested in startups over the years. What are some of the main criteria you look for in startups or in founder teams before making an investment decision?
We have different funds. So if I think of our early stage global industry agnostic fund, we initially really sprayed, I think, in over 30 countries and across 10 different industries with a strong focus, of course, on fintech, future of commerce, education, and healthcare. And when looking at these businesses, I think, like all funds, of course, there's that due diligence to be done on the team, the integrity of the team, and the capability of the founders complementing one another, and you believing that they're going to be able to overperform on the business and the impact on the ground. And then there's like more, if I say like specific criteria that we keep in mind so that we ensure the performance of our portfolio from what is that maturity sweet spot we're looking for. In the
Hmm.
case of our second fund, we look at companies that have already a product market fit, are making a consistent revenue on a monthly basis, have a strong technology. So then there are like more specific elements we look at by industry and maturity of the business, which makes sense because now we have this early stage fund, but we have later stage funds like the Seedstars Africa Ventures, that is doing more Series A on the continent, and others by industry.
Makes sense. Okay, so Seedstars is having impact and initiatives across different countries, time zones, and cultures. What challenges have you encountered in those different countries, time zones, and cultures, and how did you overcome them?
As Seedstars growing as a business, correct? Where we were lucky is that I think from day one, we wanted this to be a global play. So we accepted the challenges that went with growing a team remotely because we wanted to be operating globally. There was no other way for us to grow the team if it was not already at a global scale, remotely and across different time zones. But you can, of course, imagine all the complications that many of us have now lived through COVID, of the virtual context of trying to get all team members in one call, even though some are in Colombia versus Singapore to Kenya. So what's the right time to trying to understand the mimics and what's really happening across a Zoom call, when you see that you can't replace face-to-face. So for a lot of relating to like team motivation, accelerating brainstorms where we have these kind of strategic think tank sections, all this doesn't work very well remotely. So we used to have the summit and events that we were doing across the different regions that allowed us to reunite as a team, or put together the teams needed when we had specific needs for on-site sessions. But yeah, it's the typical obstacles of growing remotely. For us, we embraced it from day one because that was the only way we would see Seedstars succeed if we were global enough, and also in terms of mitigation of risk, so having a diversified portfolio of activities across the globe.
Okay, speaking of diversity, you're one of Europe's most influential women in the startup and venture capital space, and I'm curious, like, what challenges have you faced in a predominantly male-oriented industry, and how did you overcome them?
Strangely enough, I have not felt the bias until I became maybe a mother, and that's where I was more aware of the potential biases of just having to deal with going through the pregnancy and coming back after a maternity leave, where strangely enough, even though I have unbelievably comprehensive co-founders that are male, that never was really something, it was never really a question or something that we had to discuss. Whereas now that I had become a mother, I saw a lot of differences of me having to kind of maybe come back and work twice as hard. Also simply because you have this sense of imposter syndrome and wanting to make sure you belong. But that has... So I think that was the awareness, and then from that awareness, what do you do with it? And since I think at Seedstars we've always had a great parity, women and men, but how do we better support our women talents to grow within the organization? How do we make sure when we look at pipeline of deal flows to invest in, how do we really make sure that the due diligence process is tailored also for women founders and other minority groups, that where we're not missing out on untapped talent or untapped business opportunities? And that's really what we've been working over the past years. Because with my awareness, you start realizing the biases that I'm the first putting on myself and the team, but also making sure we can build more transparency and processes within the organization and within the activities that we do.
And is there like an internal goal or quota at Seedstars when it comes to engaging female entrepreneurs? Is there like a North Star metric, a goal that you're aiming for?
Yeah, so within so Seedstars is separated in two main activities. On one side, we have everything related to programs and our educational activities such as Seedstars Academy. And here we're
Hmm.
50-50 in terms of women and men parity. And we've a very strong gender equity focus in the programs that we launched. So we have an
Hmm.
academy program that is a 2 years physical school running, coding and entrepreneurial school running in Abidjan for 300 women. We're doing a gender lens program with GIZ in the EU to support women SME-led businesses. So a lot of focus is put not only on the actions we have and the programs we operate, but also within the team. On the
Hmm.
investment side, we have pledged, I don't know if that's the right word, to the 2X challenge. So it's a challenge that has been set up by the different DFI and investment vehicles from development banks.
Hmm.
And this is, again, to push for parity within the investment team. So us from the GP to the analyst, we have as many men as women.
Hmm.
And also in terms of the portfolio construction, our target is over 30% of the portfolio of our investees are women founders.
Awesome. Okay, that sounds very good. And you have managed to catalyze over $100 million in impact funding during your time at Seedstars. What strategies helped you achieve this milestone?
I think it was what I was mentioning before. It's really this diversification, not thinking there's a one size fits all for all the markets, going on
Hmm.
the ground, grassroots approach to understanding where does the ecosystem stand? Where are the inefficiencies? Where should we come in to provide the most value? Working with the local organization, mentors, investors, so we don't, so that we really come in for long-term play.
Hmm.
And from there, trying to figure out what's the sustainable model. And it's very difficult, especially on the capacity building side, because there is no real operating model to work with the businesses. It can't be like a B2C where the entrepreneurs pay for your program. So it's really working with the development banks, corporates, governments and foundations that can support us.
Hmm.
And then reflecting on how can you sustain that over time so that it's not kind of a, and we've done many errors over the past, and it's figuring out how can you best implement according to the needs of the market. But so I would really say this diversification, never kind of putting all eggs in one basket,
Hmm.
and looking at this as a funnel. So launching schools like funds according to the needs and having a very long-term purpose and focus so that we can get there.
Hmm. And recently, you have launched Seedstars Capital, an alternative investment platform for emerging fund managers. What kind of support is needed by up-and-coming funds in today's landscape?
I think so that's it's already a great indicator to see more and more fund managers popping out on all these markets wanting to provide an investment thesis for the regions.
Hmm.
What we see is still the gap is that it's difficult for them to raise money, especially institutional money. So how can we support them through our platform, through the brand, but also the partnerships we have built over time with these potential investors, and I think also helping them structure themselves and formalize kind of their investment thesis on an impact lens. So how do you build the right framework monitoring system so that you can really talk about impact within your fund thesis? How do you support them accessing also the right mentors, experts for their portfolio company, which is sometimes linked to a global network and not necessarily a regional one? So these type of issues we've seen come across, and that's why we've decided to launch this Seedstars Capital with an objective really to catalyze the growth of these fund managers. Something we felt like we did quite well with founders, and now doing that with fund managers, which in many ways have a similar DNA.
Hmm. Cool. And Seedstars also established the Seedstars Academy coding schools to address the talent gap. How do you think new age education can be molded to cater the market's needs?
So I think this is a global issue. I hope my my kids, I mean, the education system in Europe will also evolve because we need to catch up with where the market is and how we need to build the future leaders for tomorrow.
Hmm.
For us, it came from a pain internally, from a pain we saw in our portfolio companies of not having talents that could really help them scale the businesses in more leadership roles. And so that's why we wanted to try and support upstream the funnel of talents you would want to support and invest in by building this Seedstars Academy, which had for objective to provide peer-to-peer, challenge-based, gamified approach to learning, where you don't have lectures and teachers in classrooms, but the objective is that you work with your peers to solve problems, so that you can enhance your problem-solving capabilities, your critical thinking approach, your capability to work as a team, all those kind of buzzwords that you hear in reports from the WEF and other organizations that prove to be the determining factors of success for a talent to succeed in tomorrow's market, because it's so chaotic, it changes so fast. We in many ways don't know what most of the jobs are going to look like tomorrow. So it was important for us to start and build a foundation of these types of academies that we just launched in Ivory Coast. Hopefully we'll be expanding to India and Tanzania soon. But yeah, to fuel kind of the pipeline of talents that would then go on the markets to either launch their own businesses or join businesses in the public and private sector that need these type of talents.
Makes sense. Cool, very cool. And so we're currently in rather challenging economic times. So venture capital is not as fluidly flowing as it used to be. Due diligence takes longer. Valuations are lower. Do you think this is a short-term market correction, which will soon be over, or part of a bigger, longer phase of market corrections?
A lot is happening, and time will tell. But I think there is still a lot of instability, and we are seeing market correction in terms of simply the valuations of the startups right now, and this, as you mentioned, the slowing down of the capital allocation to VC and PE in these specific regions. But it will. I think that's why before I was talking about always looking at this as a long-term play. It's cyclical. History has shown it over time, and so you have to just also be patient, and we have successfully been able to make profitable investment and sustainable businesses in these markets in the past, and it's a question of kind of riding through the tough times and being there, more importantly, for the entrepreneurs during those times, so that when the market kicks in again, then we can help them accelerate the impact that they have in with their products and services. So yes, but again, if with a long-term play, a diversified portfolio, which is something we've done from day one, we see huge opportunities still across the different markets.
Okay, so as final question, Alisee, I wanted to ask, are there any Seedstars initiatives, events coming up later this year that you would like to bring to the attention of our listeners? Something that they should definitely not miss out on?
Yeah, so we're actually celebrating the 10 years of Seedstars. So I'm currently on a world tour to reconnect with the different communities right now in Nairobi, Kenya, to meet with many of our portfolio companies and members that have supported us. So we'll be continuing. We're going to Medellin, we're going to Mexico, California. We'll be also organizing events in Jakarta and elsewhere. So definitely to connect with Seedstars through our newsletter or through the team on LinkedIn and social media, which are very present. And then we're doing a larger event at Building Bridges in Geneva in October, where we'll be reuniting kind of the global community of Seedstars in one place to continue and discuss kind of what are the major challenges we have still in allocating and unlocking capital in many ways towards these challenges that we are seeing around the world, knowing that we have these great opportunities to invest in.
Wow.
So yeah, it would be great. And I think Europe in October has a lot of great events. So if your community is interested, that would be great to have them.
Sounds good. But it really sounds like your job is to travel the world and to meet tomorrow's innovators. Yeah, very nice.
Yes,
okay.
Good.
Well,
it's a nice job.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, Alisee. It was great talking to you, and congratulations on your success so far. And EU Startups will keep on following your journey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.